Hi, everyone. I am here today to talk about Lilith with our special guest, April Layton. She's a researcher and she knows fact from myth and a little bit about both. And as far as Lilith goes, I find her very confusing as far as what I know about her when I try to research her. It's like I can't tell what is myth from what is truth. And I always like to start where I find my belief systems from fact. Look at what fact is. And then from there, explore myths, explore everything else, and decide what feels right for me. And as far as Lilith goes, a long time ago, I tried to research her and it was like, okay, I can't figure this out. So, um, what I found was that she was only mentioned in the Bible once. And where we get everything else is a lot of it is myth, some from the Dead Sea Scrolls. I mean, many different things, but she feels very obscure to me. And I feel like what a lot of people get about her is from channeled messages on Oracle decks or something, not the real true, what do we know about Lilith? Like, where did we get she's a demon or a screech owl or kills babies? And,
well, that was what I was going to reference, actually. So she's very disparaged, right? The first time we hear about her in Isaiah, he's calling her a screech owl who kills babies. Like this is not a good first impression of any woman. But yeah, they went out of their way a lot to disparage her. So we have to kind of look at why. Why go out of your way to attack a female, over and over again, over the millennia, and every opportunity you're putting her down when you're talking about her. And I think a lot of that roots in her origin story. She was not a convenient female for the patriarchy. She was very inconvenient, actually, and getting rid of her overall just solved a lot of problems for them, because to try to explain to women, well, so what happened was there was actually a wife before Eve, and she didn't quite want to go with the system. So we just kind of, got rid of her and replaced her. I don't think women would have loved that at all in the first place. So it was easier for them to just slowly over the years just take her out of more and more. And honestly, if it hadn't been for the discovery of the Song of Sages and the Nag Hammadi scrolls, I'm not sure we would have gotten much further. So it was just over time as we discover more of these scrolls, and they can't control it. 20 years ago, the church was not in control anymore of the translations. So suddenly we're starting to get this information that's not being filtered and edited through the church and the patriarchy. That was our biggest problem with Lilith, because she's inconvenient, and easier to hide. They don't have to answer questions. So in the alphabet of Sirach, which is the first reference to Lilith, we find out that she was created at the same time as Adam from dirt. So, with Eve, we're used to the idea of, she was created from his rib bone. And we have all these details, to kind of give her a placement.
Now, go back to where this is rooted in. Where did you say?
It's the alphabet of Sirach. It's removed. It's an older Talmud. So it was written 700 AD is the approximation on when that was written. So we're about 700 years out, and they're trying to describe in this non-canonical book. They're trying to describe the legend of Lilith and why she had to be done away with, and how we ended up with Eve as opposed to Lilith as the first mother. And so the story kind of goes into God has created the Garden of Eden and everything is wonderful. He's done with the animals, same kind of line. Adam wants a mate. So God decides, okay, I'm going to create them at the same time. You know what I mean? So the story kind of gets flipped a little bit from when Adam is going to God, but we find out later he goes to God because of Lilith. So then the original Genesis story starts to make a lot more sense when he's complaining about why Lilith won't, or why Eve won't do what he wants her to do. So in the original version, after they're both created, they're enjoying the garden. They're going around there, they're naming the animals, they're doing all the things that they do. But in their sex life, there's this terrible imbalance. And it's very upsetting to Adam. He really can't get over it. Lilith refuses to lay underneath him. In fact, she wants to be on top. And she tells him that. She says, well, we're equal. There's no reason why I should submit to you and lay on the ground beneath you. You lay on the ground beneath me.
And
so he gets pretty.
we get that from where you said in the beginning, right?
The alphabet of Sirach. Yes.
The alphabet of
Yes.
Sirach. Okay.
Yeah, and that is also in the Nag Hammadi scrolls. So there are a couple different ways to find it. You can read the version that was in the Nag Hammadi scrolls, or you can read the version that was removed, canonically and is considered like a lore.
Okay.
But I was surprised they match pretty close. So we can feel somewhat confident they haven't done too much editing, in the past 1500 years. So
Okay, now I don't want to go too far off subject, but before we get further on Lilith and the story of her and Adam and Eve, what do we know came before Adam and Eve? Like, how long ago approximately is the story of Adam and Eve? How long ago?
About 5,500 years.
5,500 years ago is what we have fact, like written, history that's been passed through the ages, not myth, actual people writing, right?
Yes, but our biggest source for this is the Bible itself, which also causes a bit of a problem, but yes.
Because
that is our
Bible
source.
was changed to take the feminine out and make it what they wanted it to control the people. So
exactly.
You and I have talked a little bit about this before, but it is believed that maybe Lemuria and Atlantis came before Adam and Eve.
Yes, absolutely.
So the only reason we're referencing them as the first people on Earth is because that's the only written history we have, right? Or is there written history of Lemuria and Atlantis?
There is, Plato and Socrates both reference Atlantis. I don't know about Lemuria, but Atlantis is definitely referenced in some of the older philosophical texts from the Greeks. Okay. It was seen as, a great catastrophe. So at least we have a lot of outside sources, for the existence of Atlantis. Lemuria is a bit more questionable. We don't have any outside references. I believe it's entirely channeled.
Okay.
So,
all right.
Yeah, as it pertains to that. Yeah. Yeah.
That's good to know. I always like to look at the basis, like where we came from, what we know about where we came from, because most people look at the story of Adam and Eve and even Lilith as the first people here on Earth. But I don't think that's actually the case. It's just that we only, right, from your research, we only go back 5,500 years to 7,000, didn't you tell me?
Yeah, and actually we have stories that are older from the Babylonians and the Sumerians, so you see a lot of kind of cross-referencing. For instance, I talked to you a little bit about this. Noah and the Great Flood is actually the story of Gilgamesh and the Great Flood. From Mesopotamia, it's about 500 years older. It's a carbon copy, same story, just change the names. And you see this a lot. You saw this with Eve, but we didn't realize because no one told us we were seeing a replacement female, that we were seeing an edited story where they plagiarized the name and suddenly, Eve is the original woman, nothing to see here, move along,
It seems like both women are demonized a bit. I mean, Eve's the one who made Adam eat the apple and, that he was just this saint and woman was, bad.
There are older stories actually where Lilith is recorded as the snake in the tree. Yeah, it was her revenge. And so you'll see a lot of these older drawings of the female succubus, and it comes from that. That was supposedly, she was enraged when God replaced her with Eve. So her way to get revenge was to go into the garden and trick Eve, to basically make her tainted goods, just like she was. There was no pure, perfect female for the patriarchy. And that was the intention. They weren't going to have their little do-gooder. No one was going to let them.
Yeah.
So, when to go back to the story, when God tells Adam, basically, go try to work this out with Lilith, try to ask her if she could, find a compromise with you. Is there a way you guys could kind of meet in the middle? And Lilith was very staunch in what she felt and how she, believed that she should be treated. And she was very direct with Adam and told him, no, I'm not going to participate in your system. When we have sex, we're going to have sex in an equal way, or we're not going to have sex at all. So, you know, it was very early reference to men and women and kind of the social cultural problems that have plagued us for 6,000 years. I mean, this is the same thing.
Yeah, that's a great thing to bring up because women's sexuality has been so under attack, and
Objectified.
it still
Yes.
is, you know. I think we're still mixed up when you see what's being put out there. We're trying to, as women, own our sexuality, own our sensuality, own who we are as a whole, and not play shadow to the overexpression of what that is, because we've been
Right.
repressed for so long. Like, what is our natural state of being, you know?
We wouldn't have a clue. I mean, and look at it, look at this origin story here, where most of us cut our teeth on Christianity. Most of us are raised to believe the Garden of Eden story. Most little girls grow up thinking that in some way the fact that they're a female is directly responsible for all the pain and suffering and sin in the world. Men do not grow up with this conditioning. You know, they are not subjected to this like we have been for thousands of years. You know, and the fact that this all roots in the idea that a woman wanted to have equal sex. And so for 5,000 years, the patriarchy has tried to put us in our place. That's ridiculous. And then, you know, the story is not any better when Lilith doesn't submit to have sex the way Adam wants. God just creates Eve, throws Lilith out of the garden. But here's where it gets really interesting. They try to get Lilith to come back before he creates Eve, and she refuses because she understands, you know, this role that they've created me for and they want me to play. I don't feel like it's fair. So this is really the introduction of feminism. If you wanted the root and origin of feminism, I give you 5,500 years ago in the Fertile Crescent. We are introducing feminism. But, you know, she holds her ground and they tell her, if you don't come back, we're going to start slaughtering 100 of your children a day. So I'd like to put a pause right here.
Yes.
How does Lilith have 100 children? And how does she have enough that can slaughter 100 a day? And if we're in the Garden of Eden, where all humans have been created and exist, where are these kids? So
And
I would
who
like
did
to
she
suggest.
bear these children with? Was it
Exactly.
Adam, or was there someone else?
So some of the myths say that she snuck in the garden and stole Adam's seed when he was sleeping. But other myths.
So she raped him.
Yes. Now, see, this is the origin. Literally, we're seeing the origin of the succubus. That is the literal origin of the succubus. She sneaks in the Garden of Eden while he's sleeping, steals his seed, and then to get revenge, comes back, you know, and tricks Eve, poor innocent little Eve, into being stupid and taking the apple so that she can sabotage the whole thing. And either way, they can blame the female. They can blame Eve, the female, for taking the apple, Lilith, the female, for manipulating her and causing all this chaos in the first place. And poor Adam, he just wanted somebody to lay on the ground while he had sex with him. And now we've got the whole world in complete chaos because, you know, he's not having sex the way he wants to. And I think the confirmation here for women is that God accommodates him. God goes out of his way to get him the appropriate female. You know, so this is early conditioning here about the value of women versus the value of men. And we can take it a step further, because if we talk about how Lilith is described, she's described with skin as black as night and eyes as blue as the sky. Well, we know for a fact that Eve is not described as black. I mean, we can just come right out, and that's pretty well socially accepted and known. I don't think many people would argue with me. I've never seen a reference to her as anything other than usually blonde with blue eyes, you know, very, very Caucasian, you know, looking.
Mm-hmm.
And imagine the social implications if the first woman who refused to lay under a man was, you know, not only black, but then that would take all of this conditioning and social structure where they've said specifically in the Old Testament that you can't have any kind of intermarriage. That's what they based that on. So now we've taken this entire system where they're like, okay, uneven yoke, don't separate. You know what I mean? Don't be unevenly matched. Don't marry somebody who's not your ethnicity or your culture or race. Well, that gets completely destroyed, because on its face, if this is the truth, then God created a black woman first and a white man. And what does that say? I mean, where does that put us?
Mm-hmm.
So here we have Lilith, who in every way is very different from Eve now. You know, and as soon as she gets thrown out of the garden, she goes to the land of Nod. And a lot of people read this in Genesis where they talk about the land of Nod, and it just gets lost. Like, what's the land of Nod? You know, who's there? Why is this coming up? But in the old text, that's where she went with her children.
So tell us
And then,
a little bit about the land of Nod.
so the land of Nod was supposed to have existed, I believe it was east of the Garden of Eden. And it was full of all of the non-desirables. So demons, succubus, incubus, and Lilith was the mother of them all. And according to lore, after Cain killed Abel and he was given the mark on his forehead, it clearly says he was sent to the land of Nod where he took a wife. Well, guys, there's only one land of Nod. And we know what the wife there he would have had to choose from would be. So the older lore says that Cain took Lilith as his wife. And that is the origin of all the demons on earth in the older canonical texts.
So all
So
the
100
bad
babies
people,
a day.
all the people who do stuff, that's where that is rooted in.
Yes.
I just
And
find
it's
this
all
so interesting.
all originating because she wouldn't lay down underneath him. This literally can all be traced back to she preferred to have an equal style of sex. And so because of all of that, you know, women have to be, I guess it was the patriarchy's way, because we know also with creative editing, like Constantine, Justin Martyr, the 4th and 5th century, there was a lot of councils, Council of Antioch, Council of Nicaea. You know, some of these they're getting together and they're saying, how do we remove all the females? Well, Sophia got the same axe as Lilith. It was just years later. You know, Sophia was a very, very big part, especially of like the Gnostic Bible. And now most people don't even know she exists, just like Lilith. I mean, they went after Mary too. And look at what they did to Mary Magdalene. In every way, the only person they didn't demonize is Mary the mother, because it supported their message.
Oh, they made her who we are supposed to be. I don't even believe the story
Exactly.
of Mary is what they say it is. You've got to
Right.
look at the root of these words, because I think a lot gets lost in translation. I love to look up, like, I don't even remember what I found. I looked up define Lilith, like looked at the root word Lilith. I think it had to do with demons and stuff like
Yes,
that.
absolutely. I mean, there are older texts where they talk about when your children are born, if they have remnants of wings or they're deformed, that Lilith was involved in their conception and production. I mean, it's just, I mean, she literally, the word demonized really comes from her at its root. I mean, they took her, as far as what we know about her, she was a very, you know, average, typical female. The only thing she did was she just didn't want to lay underneath Adam. In every other way, they say she was a great wife. So, I mean, I feel like Lilith was attacked and marginalized, and she's so hard to learn about and find out about because they don't really want this out here. They don't want a lot of us women sitting around reading this information about what they've done to all of our matriarchy, you know, what they've done to us, you know, and how they have molded our society for us to be in the role they want us to be in by taking every female, by taking Sophia, by taking Lilith, by turning Mary Magdalene into a whore, by making Mother Mary, you know, unrelatable in any way. Who feels like they're anything like her, you know? Like, come on. You know, so I mean, it was systemic and it was intentional. Because if we have powerful women, we might become powerful. And what happens if we become powerful? You know, we might take their position.
From the beginning of history that we have documented, it has always been patriarchal living for the last 5,500 years, unless you look at before that, what we have about Atlantis, correct? And
yes, and older. We have matriarchal systems that still exist from that time. The Native Americans, they are primarily matriarchal, and they have been for at least 5,000 years of recorded history. So before the rise of the patriarchy, we had a matrilineal system.
So I want to point this out, that a lot of people don't put a lot of thought into, but I do, because I was raised Mormon. So I was preached to about the Book of Mormon, and the Mormons believe in both the Book of Mormon and the Bible. And what their big thing is that the Bible is over here in Jerusalem. It's happening over there, but the Book of Mormon is the history of what was happening in the Americas over here on these lands. And not, I mean, I don't believe in the Bible, I'm not Mormon at all, but what's interesting to me about that is that's a good point, is that I think the Bible is only about a certain area, and that's what we're basing all of creation on. I mean, where's the
There's nothing
history from
else.
China and Japan and, you know,
Mhm.
Bali and I mean, Egypt's probably considered biblical, but it's just like I feel like we're putting our entire basis of our origin in the hands of who took the records, but it's not the truth of
100%.
the entire everything that there is. And that's what I'm getting at. And a lot of us think, well, our world has always been this way if it's been this way for 5,500
Yeah,
years,
no.
right? No, there's stuff before 5,500 years. And that's, is Atlantis, from my understanding, Atlantis was balanced, masculine and feminine, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so where do we have in history the matriarchal times?
Pre-Judeo-Christian times. So you've got to go back about 6,000 years ago, and societies were much more matrilinear. And you've also, I mean, if you look at it contextually, the creator gods, all the primary creator gods are female, and they don't start shifting to be male until about the 1st century. And that's right after Zoroastrianism is introduced, and you have this concept that becomes created of a primary soul deity. So it's a very good point that you bring up, because they have the option to choose the female that creates life and has children as the main creator god, or the male who cannot create life and have children as the main creator god. So naturally they chose the male. So, you know, that's really started to just kind of solidify what was already happening all over the developing world. And then if you think about the Romans, I mean, I don't think the first thing that comes to your mind when I say the word Roman is, wow, they were so endearing to their females. Everyone remembers how great the Romans treated women. My God, we were lucky. So, you know, it's just over and over again for thousands of years, like any point in time where they can socially or culturally direct us to look away from the female and to look rather at the male, they're doing it. But before that, it was understood that women had children. If you look at the older statues, you know, even the ones that are like 10,000 years old, they're primarily female, because they understood, oh, look, women have babies and babies come out of their bodies. So like, hey, they're probably creating that. I mean, just based on what we know, like, we're going to make an assumption here.
Yeah.
You know, so it was a very intentional shift. And I think it all rooted from the fact that they had to choose one God. People were tired of the pantheon. They wanted monotheism. This was new and exciting. Oh, one God we have to pray to, one God who can do everything. I don't need to pray to 10 different gods and make 5 different offerings and, you know, go through all these different things. I've just got a one-stop shop. You know, it's like commercialism now. It was just the basis.
Yeah. And
how do we make this
lasted
super
all
easy?
these years. It's insanity.
Absolutely. Well,
so
if you can do something easy or you could do something difficult, 9 times out of 10, human nature is to do the easy thing,
so where
not
could
to
they,
do the work.
where could they find the history of matriarchy that came prior to biblical text?
Merlin Stone, When God Was a Woman. She did a fantastic anthropological study based on the matriarchy and matrilinear, you know, rule and culture and society.
And that has the fact-based history in it? Okay, perfect.
Oh yeah, yeah. She's a cultural anthropologist. So she
Okay.
uses the historical record, which I love.
And I think it's important, the reason I'm kind of like keeping you here at the beginning of this story before we go further into Lilith, is because I think it's important to establish that what the Bible is telling us is just a piece of history. It's not all of history. And
Yes.
and
it's incredibly biased.
yes, there you go. Okay, so if we're going to study Lilith further, now take us deeper into Lilith's story so we can understand Lilith and how we can see Lilith within ourselves, because we know she represents the darkness, we know she represents shadow, but she also represents power, and she represents like your sexuality and your fertility and, you know,
Esoteric
the demon
knowledge.
and the snake.
Yes.
They see her as being an exorcist and killing babies, and like, tell us about her as a person. What do we know?
We don't know very much, but we do know that because she was shown as a serpent, in that point in time, contextually, serpents were seen as the conveyors of all wisdom. So it wasn't a bad thing to be seen as a snake back then. You know, you were considered wise if you were seen as a snake. So we do know that at least they considered her very intelligent, which we see kind of with her banter when she's, you know, arguing with the angels about what she's going to do and where she's going to live, and where, you know, God is giving her the option, go back, we'll pretend none of this happened and we can all move on. And she's, you know, she's choosing instead to have her autonomy, to have her freedom, you know, to be an independent woman in this world she was just created to live in. You know, it really is the introduction of us finding ourselves. And she's our oldest mother who decided, you know what? I'm a person and I matter. And my role is not to please this male next to me. You know, that's not why I was created. So I see her as, you know, I see a lot of characters of myself in her. You know, she's very independent. She wants to see the world the way that she feels it, not how her mate is telling her to experience it or how society or culture are saying. She wants to really experience it. And she's not being disrespectful. She's not even hateful. You know, I mean, when she's talking to the angels and God, she explains to them, this is not for me. This is not the life I want to live, you know? And so we see for the first time a woman getting to say, hey, let me make some choices for myself that have nothing to do with anyone but me, and how to take care of me, you know, how to invest in myself and make myself valuable in this environment that I now exist in. So we know she's very independent. We know she's very intelligent. We know that she felt, for whatever reason, that it was very important to stand up and make a big deal about where she was positioned during sex. And as the first woman, you know, in this story, she's doing a huge favor for us. I mean, she literally threw herself on the first grenade. How many women after her have had this same argument and this same fight and could have used her as a role model or for guidance or leadership? And that is specifically why we weren't allowed to have her, why they don't want us to grow up with this knowledge and have this woman when we're little girls that we can look up to, who, you know, wanted to be independent, who wanted to have her own autonomous existence. And it's treated as if she, you know, well, look, she's a screech owl. She's a succubus. She's responsible for all the terrible things that are happening 2,000 years ago. I mean, she's just murdering babies because obviously that's the content of her character, because she wants to be autonomous and independent. So
let's go into that. Why is she seen as a screech owl? Why is she seen? Where do we get this?
So that I believe is exclusively from the patriarchy, but we get it because in the older days, they were still making amulets for their children. So all women were familiar with Lilith, but they're meeting her in the capacity of fear now. They're meeting her as soon as they get pregnant, and she's going to come for their baby. So now, you know, they're having to make these amulets that they put around their children's necks when they're born with the angels' names that will protect them from Lilith coming to get them. You know what I mean? So it's just absolutely ridiculous. They never get to see her in the capacity that she actually is. And that's because everything is being specifically engineered and pushed in a direction that when you do learn about Lilith, you're terrified of her. You certainly don't want to ask any questions about, why did God kick her out of the garden again? Oh, hell no, we're not even going to talk about her. You know, she's just upsetting in every way possible. And the more that they demonize her, the more it behooves them, because they don't have to answer these questions from their wives and their daughters and their mothers, women in their life.
And how witchy is that? I mean, they're giving their children amulets to wear.
Yes, to stop the succubus from killing them or having SIDS. So it's like they believe in her, they accept her. You know, they have all these rituals that they go through to prevent her from doing things, or, you know, but here we are again. Everyone just wants to control Lilith, and Lilith just wants to live her life and be left alone. You know, she really does.
And they see her as killing babies.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Where did
and raping their husbands. Now, don't forget that. she comes and rapes their husbands when they're sleeping. I mean, she is just the ultimate. Poor Lilith. So I mean, for somebody who didn't do anything but just try to live, She has been attacked in every capacity.
Where did that come from? As far as stealing children and all of that. I mean, we can see now because of her role with Adam, why she's seen as the seductress and the sexuality and, all this, but why the baby killer? Where is that? Where was that? Where did they start writing it? When, I should
So
say.
it's hazy, but where it seems to originate from is the idea that if she had sex with a human male and then he went and had sex with a human female, that his seed would be tainted in some way. And there are documents where they talk about if your child is born and it has the remnants of wings or looks like it could have had wings, well, then Lilith was involved in its conception. And so it probably should be destroyed because it's not actually human. So we start to have some really crazy ideas and concepts about 5,000 years ago. And, in any way that a demon is referenced or can be brought up, for some reason, especially the church fathers, found it very convenient to attach Lilith to that story. You know what I mean? Just to keep reconfirming to us females that not only do we not want to know anything about her, we don't want to act anything, but, you better just not ask. Let's just leave her buried in the past, cloaked in darkness, like they like to say.
Yeah.
That's their favorite descriptor of her.
Now, the wings, and let's look at, I know you have a lot of information about actual angels and different life forms being on Earth at that time, and there's record of this. So the actual wings on these babies that were born that Lilith had something to do with, where's the tie between that? Because we look at in modern day as angels there's an angelic realm, all the angels are above, they're not here on Earth. Tell us a little bit about that. I love your wisdom on that because it's not really well known.
So initially, the earth was split into quadrants in Genesis, and it talks about God had set up specific sections to be surveilled by what we would call the watchers. In the Old Testament, they are referred to as the watchers. And what the watchers were angels that were given appointments to, help with the different humans in their area.
Okay,
so
let me
each
stop
quadrant
you here real quick, just for a moment, just so everyone knows. So when we cast our circle or when we open our circle, we're calling the guardians of the watchtowers, if you notice, as well as our circle of alongside our circle of empowerment, which is ascended masters, I call when I'm opening a circle. So I want you so they understand why they're calling the guardians of the watchtowers.
Right. So the watchers, their initial first job was to protect humans. That was the first charge that God gave them. Protect the people under your care, protect the people in your quadrant. And so over the years,
biblical. This is biblical.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And so over the years, they came down and started interacting more with their humans. And this will be the origin of the wing mutation on the babies, but it's going to be about 500 years later. So they come down, they interact with the human females. According to Genesis, they fall in love with the human women. They have babies with them. They try to lead lives. This offends God. It offends God for a couple reasons, but primarily it offends God because he did not create them. And he does not like the idea of something existing that he did not create. So he gets very upset about this whole concept. In the Bible, they are called the Nephilim. They're also referred to as giants. So we have a lot of stories about these hybrids that are existing, about 3,500 years ago in the Middle East, for sure. In Turkey and Armenia, they continue to find remains of 10 to 13 foot skeletons. You know what I mean? So this is a thing. There are old stories about the giants building the pyramids in Egypt. They have photos of like these much larger humans. And so theoretically, we believe that that is what's left of the people that are referred to in the Old Testament, that were the product of a union between the watcher and a human. And so sometimes in old lore, the human hybrids would get things like wings, and they would get that from their father, the angel who had wings, who passed that on. And so then you start to see more of these things like, oh, if babies are born with mutations, it's definite that an incubus was involved or a succubus, or, we've got some kind of demon activity going on here, to attach to those wings. So it's to remind the people, remember what happened when the watchers came down and the women had children with them. God sent a flood and destroyed the whole earth. Don't be messing around in that area. Don't be doing stuff like that, because God will send another flood and destroy the whole earth. And as a side note, they recently found a 5,500-year-old clay tablet that was recorded by a Sumerian astronomer who talks about a huge white bowl that he sees coming through the sky, headed for the mountains. And they found an impact site outside
God,
of,
that just gave me a chill. Like,
yes,
that's
they
also
found an,
similar to White Buffalo Woman. Do you think? I don't know if you know a lot
isn't that
about her, but
amazing?
yeah. Wow.
Yes, I do. That's what I'm saying. So they found an impact site and they dated the impact site to about 5,000 years ago. So I'm very optimistic that in the next coming years, we're going to start to get finally some more information as they discover more of these clay tablets and, cuneiform and all the other things that's really the pieces that we're missing is where are all the records from Mesopotamia and Sumer, and it's a bad joke, but in our community, we are still upset about the burning of the library at Alexandria. Like it upsets us to this day. When I talk about it, I get angry. These were our records.
Yeah.
And here's another example of a woman getting in the way of the church. We all know the story of Hypatia. She's another Sophia and Lilith. At every opportunity where they find a woman who's empowered and leading other women and any kind of positive example, they will shut her down and demonize her.
So tell
over
us
and
a
over
little
again.
bit about Sophia. I know we're supposed to be talking about Lilith and we're
You're
going all over the place here,
fine.
but I love this.
These are all relevant.
Basic creation. Like, I think this is important to know.
So Sophia is very fascinating because to the Gnostics, Sophia was an actual female and she was the wife of God. You see, she was the Holy Spirit. Now in Greek, spirit, the Holy Spirit translated is Sophia. Sophia means wisdom in Greek. That is the meaning of her name. And the Holy Spirit was the wisdom of God. Now, this was understood 2,000 years ago. This was the essence of information and knowledge from the Creator. That was Sophia, to put her contextually. But they had also given her a role as the Queen of Heaven. And initially, she was known as the mother of Jesus. These stories that we have now have been so heavily edited and changed over the years by the patriarchy. Most of them don't even resemble, but we don't know to look because we read it for the first time. And why would you question that? How would we know there's anything else? Just like Adam and Eve. Why would we know about the existence of Lilith? On its face, it seems like the story's complete. But yeah, so Sophia was the mother of all humans. She was considered the wife of God, the Queen of Heaven, the mother of Jesus, the source of most knowledge, divine love, compassion, all of these things. And I believe it was the Council of Nicaea or the Council of Antioch, where they said unequivocally, we cannot have a female in any role of authority or power or leadership. And, they just started hacking them. And we had very little to begin with. They had already taken out Lilith and everything else. So now we're in the New Testament. They've already cleansed the Old Testament. Now they go after the New Testament. So who do we have? Mary Magdalene, Mary Mother, and Sophia. Sophia was all but erased. I mean, you and I growing up, do you remember learning about the goddess Sophia? Because I didn't.
I questioned in my religion, like, where's the mother? Well, we keep her
exactly
sacred. We hide her so nobody will say anything bad about her. She does exist, but no talking about her.
And where do you think that came from? Why did they know to hide her so she wasn't attacked and demonized? Just saying. Over and over again. I mean, show me one female the church let us have. Show me one that the patriarchy let us have.
So I like to bring that up because a lot of times I'll refer to the Divine Mother, which is, when I say Divine Mother, I mean our Creator, not someone who's here on the actual earth, who created. And I actually believe our Creator is genderless because I just believe we don't know, because we don't know. I mean,
I tend to agree with you on that. I don't think they would even have the purpose or function of sex. So what is the point in them having sexual organs,
Yeah, like
I get why we have them.
I don't think our human brains at the level of consciousness we're at now could conceptualize or understand or make sense of how all of this actually began, because I spend a lot of time thinking about these type of random things, like, okay, even if there was a Big Bang, what happened before the Big Bang? Like, where was that initial spark of life? I can't even imagine how how something was born of nothing. Like, and I don't know, I guess I'm thinking about that because I was watching The Never Ending Story last night. Have you watched that? So they put their hands together at the end and it's darkness. And then one spark of light is birthed in their hands at the end. And that always, like, whenever I watch that, I watch it just for that last scene because it
It's the light of
feels so
creation.
true to me. Like, that's the point of creation.
Yes. I would like to point something else out, though. I had someone say this to me years ago, and it was very shocking. And so I like to repeat it, especially in the idea of a class where other women are coming to learn the sacred knowledge. There is literally nothing else that we cleave to from the Bronze Age in our society outside of Christianity. So you really have to sit, and think about that. This is literally from the Bronze Age. We are not trying to bring anything else from the Bronze Age into today to make our life better or to improve our culture or our society or anything, that we are cleaving to the ancient world. And we cleave to that to reinforce, honestly, the position of the patriarchy. And if women understood why we were involved in all these systems and why our society functioned the way it did, I think they would change it. And so did the church. They were pretty confident that we would do something about it if we understood. So, to answer the original question, why has she always been so hidden? Why do we have such a hard time finding her? She's inconvenient. Like that movie, Hidden Figures. Lilith was the first hidden figure. She was the first female they had to hide. Or like how you were raised, she was the first female they tried to make quiet and get in her place. Do what you're supposed to do, fill your role.
Get in your place.
That's right. I know. I was
place,
raised Seventh-day Adventist. You and I can relate on a lot when it comes to, repression and being raised that females are subpar and responsible for everything.
Little dainty creatures that are never supposed to question anything and,
right.
follow.
I'm always reminded of Betty White. She always had the best impression on how, which I won't repeat here, but she had a very good idea of women and how we were tougher than men and people just didn't understand.
Repeat it. I love Betty White. Bring her in.
So she said, I don't understand why everyone always says this or that's a pussy, as in reference to they're scared or they're doing something wrong. She said, pussies get beaten and they take a beating and come back. She says, why don't we call it a penis or balls? They don't take a beating.
I tell my husband that all the time. Like every time my husband or son will say they always are calling each other pussies. And I'm like, whoever you're calling as pussy is a badass. So don't forget that. Like,
Right. And that's another thing, like mentioning our children. I had a daughter and it shocked me every time she would come home and be like, oh, somebody such and such said I run like a girl. I hit like a girl. I do this like a girl, and it's this instant negative context. Like it's subpar. She's doing it like a girl. It's not as good as a boy could do it. Oh, you're not good enough, not good enough. And I think that, the more we can empower women to understand where this comes from, the quicker they're going to see it in their everyday life. Like, oh yeah, thank you, but no, thank you. I'm going to follow Lilith's path. I'm going to choose to be autonomous. I'm going to, embrace who I am, and I'm going to embrace my truth, and I'm going to take care of myself. And I'm not going to harm anyone in the process. You know what I mean? Because it's for the greater good of all. But that in itself can be very threatening because the patriarchy is not controlling that. And they don't have a narrative.
And Lilith was, she had 100 children, right? We know that from.
More than that. They said they were going to kill 100 a day. If you have 100 a day to lose, how many thousands of children do you have, supposedly?
So did we already talk about that? That they would, I don't think we talked about that here, about killing her children. Go into that.
So after she leaves the Garden of Eden, initially because she can't get along with Adam and they keep fighting, she goes into a cave. And I guess she was pregnant. So she's going to labor and the angels are chasing her and they pursue her. And I want to stop here just for a minute because I've been pregnant. You have too. I want you to really kind of visualize what I'm saying to you. This is a woman who is moments from labor, very pregnant, been rejected, been thrown out of her home, been told she, isn't good enough to be where she is, because, her choices are not acceptable. Now they're pursuing her. She has 3 angels, supernatural beings, that are chasing her out of the cave. They chase her across the Red Sea. And the story's very graphic. It's raining, it's dark, and she's crossing the water, screaming and crying and pregnant as can be. And these angels are behind her. Go back to the gardener. We're going to kill you. Can you imagine? I mean, I've been pregnant. She is like at the most compromised point in her life. And this is terrible. So they
is
catch
she
up
on
to
a
her.
boat? How is she
No.
crossing the seas? How are
On
they?
her feet, honey.
On her feet. She's
She's a
walking on
goddess.
water.
Absolutely. Jesus was not the first. There are many lizards who would argue that Jesus would not even be the last. But they catch up with her, and she's desperate, and she tells them, like, I'm not going back. I'd rather be dead, than live
And this is
life.
the land of Nod she's in. They're chasing her out of, correct?
That they chased her out of. Yeah. The cave would have been in the land of Nod, but they chase her all the way across the Red Sea. So then she comes back to the land of Nod with the angels. Now, this is important because there were 3 angel names that could be created on a pendulum or amulet that you put on your child to protect it. And it was one of the 3 names of the angels that chased her, because she turned around to them and she said, I can't go back. And they said, well, we're going to kill 100 of your children a day. And she said, okay, I agree. I'll go back to Nod. I'll stay there. You can kill 100 of my children a day. I can't go back to Eden. And that is so profound and powerful to me when I think of her as a woman and the situation she's in. Can you imagine what the world looked like to her? We have each other. She had no other women, but she's got a bunch of men telling her what she's supposed to do. No peers, no one else who looks like her, no one else that she can run to or have a sisterhood with. She was alone, and look at how she stood her ground. I mean, that in itself is enough reason to erase her. We can't have little girls growing up thinking they want to be strong like Lilith. We will create an entire society of powerful Amazons, and that cannot be controlled. That will never be controlled. And they know that. So that the idea has always been to prevent us, never let us become empowered, never as a big.
The angels come from the Garden of Eden.
Yeah, from God.
The land of Nod, and that they try to get her to come back. They chase her across the sea.
She refuses.
She refuses. So do they go to kill her children?
They do. They do.
And
they do.
That's
and over
100 of her children. So we know she has
a day.
More. A day. How could any one person give birth to more than 100 children?
See, and I think this is where they start to turn her into more of a demon and less of a human female.
Could it be that because obviously no one person could birth more than 100? I mean, I guess they seen us as living longer than 100 years back then.
But we also don't know who she was cohabitating with in the land of Nod. They're very, very limited records. The fact that we know it exists is almost a miracle. I mean, they whitewashed most of that.
And where do we see, historically, have they figured out, like they have an idea of where Nod was or where Garden of Eden was?
Yeah, east of the Fertile Crescent. So Mesopotamia, Sumer, that area, Persia, old Persia. Yeah.
So that's where stories are rooted in.
Yeah, exactly. And so if we go out the box a little bit and we say, all right, we don't believe that God created everything that was existing on the planet during this time referenced in Genesis. And if we don't believe that, well, then the sky's the limit as to what else was here. I mean, we know there were watchers. Now, God hadn't set up the quadrants yet, but we know the angels had watched the story of Lilith. We know they were fascinated with her. We know she was beautiful. It's not a hard stretch. And I read to think that maybe people wanted to come spend some time with her while she was alone in the caves.
I even read that, so she had long, dark hair, and they would use that as a threat to other women, not wherever she lived. Obviously, that was in the land of Nod, that they would curse them with long hair like Lilith. And it was like,
yes.
I will wear my hair long till the day I die. And I think, when you look at witches in history too, they're always shown with this long hair.
And that, I believe, came from, the church fathers and the canonical and in the puritanical times, not understanding that by, bringing Lilith into the picture, you're just going to let us know she existed, and the whole idea is to help reinforce the idea of a witch. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Lilith, it goes on. There were a couple books, but I think it is the Song of Sages. No, it is the Alphabet of Sirach. Okay, so this was written, the Alphabet of Sirach was written by Sirach, who was supposedly the son of the prophet Jeremiah. And he goes into a little more back detail, on her and her story, and tries to give her a little more context. But they weren't done demonizing her. Like at every opportunity, 1,000 years after, she's not even being talked about anymore. They're coming up with new ways to scare women when they're pregnant, and new amulets that you have to create with these angel names. And they were practicing that until about the 1st century.
Who are the angels? Sorry to interrupt you.
They're not listed.
Okay.
They're not listed. I know. I was looking. I was like, come on, because I thought it might be like Azazel or Samael, because before Azazel, I guess Lilith would be the original scapegoat. Before the Watchers came down, before all of this, she was the original scapegoat.
Tell us a little bit about her.
Lilith?
No, what'd you call her? Azazel?
Oh, Azazel that's one of the Watchers. So he was the leader of the Watchers, and he fell in love with a human woman and had lots of children with her. And it's interesting because if you get into Genesis and Exodus, when they start recording the genealogies and they start talking about the children of Cain and then his grandson Tubal Cain, and they don't actually say these are hybrids until we get to Noah. And as he's going on the ark, he has his sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, right? And they're all clear. So God's like, I'm going to save you and your bloodline. However, Shem, Ham, and Japheth both have like Hittite and Philistine wives. And we know their bloodlines because they're recorded. And I believe it was Ham's wife was a direct descendant of Cain. So go ahead, put them in the ark. Watch what happens. You're not accomplishing anything here. The supposed descendants of Lilith and Cain and this bloodline was very prevalent all the way through the Old Testament. It's still talked about now. And you'll see a lot of times when we get into like talking about UFOs and aliens, there are a lot of people who believe that, basically hybrids or what was left over from the angels are what we think of as aliens, or just another sentient life force that is different from us, but exists alongside us, and honestly, I don't see why that couldn't happen. Look at all the stuff right in front of our face that we don't know. There's no way we're totally aware of what's going on in our universe, no matter how egotistical we want to be.
Yeah, we love to think we know everything. And
right.
I guess that's where I love to dive into this stuff, because what we're told is the 100% truth, and I guess I have an issue with what was shared with me and told to me, because I was raised religious, and this is the church. Yeah. You don't question it, and that's that. But there's so many questions.
Yeah, lots of them. Well, and so in Sirach, what I was going to say was they go ahead towards the end of Lilith's story. I couldn't find any stories about her dying or any stories about, her ceasing to exist in any way. What I did find was in the second to 7th century, you start seeing all these stories about Lilith being the queen of heaven, or queen of hell, rather. And this comes up about the same time that Sophia is coming forward as the queen of heaven. And I don't know if they're connected, but it seems pretty interesting that as we're elevating one female, we're taking another female completely down. And so now at this point, Lilith becomes the wife of Lucifer. Now, this is very interesting because you and I both know that Lucifer is a typo who doesn't actually exist. Mm-hmm. So we have some myth going on here, some lore, and some fact.
Talk a little bit about Lucifer. I think this is an important thing because, some people, I think, that'll be drawn to the Priestess Path in this work do have still connections to Christianity and different things, even though they're dabbling in this. So it's important for them to understand that piece, because Lilith and her being demonized, I think, is directly connected to that.
Right. Well, and so and this is in the period of the New Testament that she becomes the wife, because what you have to understand is in the Old Testament, even with Judaism, contextually, we don't have a lot of this. There is no concept of a devil or a main bad guy character who's punishing, people, or roaming the earth, trying to get people to do things wrong and pestering them. That's not something that exists. the concept that the Jews had was more like an overall negative energy. And when you died, they believed you went to a place called Sheol, which if you did a really bad job, you'd be recycled and sent back to try it again. And if you didn't, you got to enjoy your afterlife. But they had no concept of hell. They still don't believe in hell. That's one thing that kind of cracks me up. I'm like, here we have Jewish people around us. We have Jewish culture. You know, we could see they don't believe in hell. They don't believe in the devil, but it just never occurs, I guess, to us because we've been conditioned to believe it.
Yeah.
So, you know, Lucifer itself is a mistranslation. It just meant morning star, but the church fathers found that, you know, if they had a nice nefarious devil that they could threaten everybody with outside of Lilith and everything else, we've got to keep everyone in line. And the way you do that is conditioning through fear, you know, and it's the oldest. They've been doing it for thousands of years. The Romans excelled at it.
Now, the ancients tracked astrology, and the morning star is actually Venus. I mean, she has a morning star and an evening star. So have you connected or researched what the morning star means as connected to Lucifer's interpretation of what Lucifer is?
Well, see, and they came up with that because he was supposed to have been the most beautiful angel underneath, you know, Jesus. So the bright star, the Venus, the beautiful star, you know, so Lucifer was supposed to have been the most beautiful of all the angels. And so that's why they related him to the beautiful planet, you know, the bright, gorgeous star at night. But it, you know, you start running into problems because again, he doesn't exist. So then when we start having these lores and stories coming out later where he exists and then he has a wife, and it's like, guys, where do we put these pieces together? The closest thing the Jews have is Beelzebub. And that's more of an idea of concept, you know, of like a group, a conglomeration of bad energy is what a Beelzebub is. We still don't have a demon or devil or Satan, you know. So as they create the ultimate bad guy, I guess it's convenient to pull the ultimate bad girl, you know, and make her his wife. So and then if you had any question.
There's no reference biblically to Lilith and Lucifer being married. No. So this is myth.
Yeah, but Lucifer doesn't even exist in the Old Testament. There's no reference to him.
And in the New Testament is where he's first mentioned as the and if you instead thought of him as a person and you read it as him being a morning star,
right?
What would that mean?
I mean, they're just basically placing him in the angel and perhaps in the watcher status, you know, because he's visible to us, so we can see him, he can see us. I think it's more of the, you know, kind of Santa Claus conditioning. He's looking at you. He knows what you're doing. Are you good or bad? You know, now you've got God watching you with a fly swatter and you've got the devil watching you, waiting for you to mess up. You know, come get you.
Total myth. I mean, we know Lucifer, Satan doesn't even exist.
Right.
It's a misinterpretation of words. So Lilith and Lucifer together is a total myth. But Lilith herself is mentioned in the Bible and other places. We know she isn't just a mythological creature they made up and are using to control people or, you know, make sense of the world. So when we do see Lilith in the Bible, what are they because she's only referenced in Isaiah, and what are they
as the screech owl.
How do they reference her?
Well, he calls her a screech owl and a succubus of the night who, you know, traumatizes and terrorizes men and children while they sleep. You know, so if she's sneaking in your house, she's trying to rape your husband or kill your kid. No woman wants anything to do, you know, with this kind of female energy, you know, and that's the problem, is that really at its core, from what I've seen, I think Lilith was probably very loving, and she seems very compassionate. You know, and reading between the lines, she had to know there'd be other women that came after her. You know what I mean? We probably all owe her a huge debt of gratitude, because if she had just fallen down, basically like Eve, imagine what our world would look like today.
I always think it's interesting to look at the women who have made it through history. You know, which ones stood this, even if their stories got manipulated and changed.
Right.
You know, Mary Magdalene was still there, even though we looked at her as a whore. It's like we need to really critically look at all the women that
Yes.
made it through history and what we do know about them, look at the myth about them, and that's really our roots and our origin. And I talk a lot about the witch wound because I believe the witch wound goes far beyond the witch trials, like way farther back than the witch trials. Like, as long as we have our main history that we focus upon in the last 5,500 years, these roots in us are damaged. The women who
Yes.
came before us, they were damaged. They did
Yes.
not
Yep.
own their power. They did not have, even the stronger of women like Lilith had to fight for who they were, and they still got passed down as demonized. So I think it's important, right alongside Mary Magdalene, where we're like clarifying who she really was, what we really know. Thank God we found the text that we found in the deserts about her.
Right.
Like,
Right.
we need to bring Lilith along with her because she's just as demonized as Mary Magdalene.
Yes.
And I think
Absolutely.
just as important of a piece of the puzzle are both women's sexuality is attacked in our
Yes.
history. And this is why we have to be very careful with our sexuality and
Yes.
what we're believing in. Like, if we were
Right.
never taught what morality was, if we were never taught to cover our bodies, that our breasts were bad, what would our world look like today? Even when I talk about people who over sexualize themselves, I'm not talking about women that are showing themselves too much. It's women that are putting all their value in their sexuality, because I think
Right.
we're seeing that swing to where it's like not a balanced masculine and feminine. It's like their body is completely 100% their worth.
Right.
When I talk about this, I'm talking about owning like looking at all the ways we have been repressed. And, I don't know that I would think it would be very beautiful to walk around without my shirt on, without a bra or something, because that's what I've been conditioned to
Yes.
think. Okay. If I was never raised that way, and women were allowed to go to the beach like men and walk around, and that was just life, would I be ashamed of my breasts? Would I be ashamed of exposing my nipples? Like, this is all conditioning, and to
Yes.
uncondition is going to take thousands of years.
Well, and that's why they say unfuck your brain. That's what they're talking about. That's
Yeah.
literally, we have to go in reverse. But to kind of comment on what you were saying earlier, women have been taught to survive. And what you're trying to do is trying to introduce information to teach them to thrive. Lilith survived. And you know what? That was probably the best she could do. I mean, she was being attacked from every direction, but it's time for us to claim the right that we get to thrive now. Survival should not be our bar anymore. That's been the bar of all of our ancestors, all of our grandmothers, for so many different reasons. It was just survive. But we have the opportunity to thrive if we claim it, but that's a long fight for women. I mean, even look at our society. The suffragettes were 100 years ago. They set themselves on fire and chained themselves to building. People don't understand. They think, oh, women got equality and we got the right to vote, and it was all because we protested peacefully. No, they were the opposite of peaceful, and so I feel like culturally and contextually, it is time for us to have our own autonomous spot in society. One that's not dictated by the roles of men or trying to be influenced by our culture. Allow us to be us. That, I think, is the message of Lilith. Allow me to be myself. I'm not hurting anyone. Why do you have to try to constantly control all these things about me? Let us thrive. We want better than survival.
If we labeled ourselves, now that we know the history of Mary Magdalene,
yeah,
it's okay to say you're a daughter of Magdalene. Before
yes,
that, if you said you were a daughter of Magdalene, you would have been saying you're a prostitute or a whore.
absolutely.
So we're
Absolutely.
still buying into the patriarchal bullshit, in my opinion.
Yes.
Because now it's like we're not paying enough attention to the fact that nobody could have said this until the church said, okay, here's the scrolls.
Right.
We have to say, now we have this truth. Now we have to say The church can no longer hide it because they found her information. Like,
Right.
okay, we can't say she's a whore and a prostitute anymore. So Magdalene is our original, like, spiritual guide for women. Like, own your power. You do have it within you. You are the healer,
Yes.
and
You're the creator force.
yes. And then we have Lilith. And could you imagine? I mean, I was just thinking as you were talking, I need to put that on my Instagram page, like, daughter of Lilith. We need to own,
Yes.
like, we are the daughters of Lilith. You put that out there, because she hasn't been accepted yet the way Magdalene has been accepted. Most people are going to look at you when you say you're a daughter of Lilith as you're like an evil freaking demon. Like, and that's where I like to push the edges of what society is feeding us, because I think we need to make Lilith proud. We are.
Yes.
You look at social
Yes.
media, young women, they're owning their sexuality and their bodies, and it's amazing.
Yes.
And
It is.
it's, it's,
C.S. Lewis, who wrote The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
yeah.
He knew this. If you think about his verbiage, it's very intentional. That's why they were daughters of Eve. He was he studied very much biblical history and mythology. He knew about Lilith. And it's interesting because people don't question that. The whole book, the whole series, the females, all the daughters are daughters of Eve, and everyone just accepts it. Well, of course they are. But no, this was intentional. He's saying the story that he was writing about were from the descendants of Eve, but he was aware there were other descendants out there with different stories. And it's interesting to me how these little details over the years, they just pop up here and there, like, what's that? Interesting.
Do you believe, genealogically speaking, we can track our ancestry to Eve or Lilith in some way?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, especially if you have, this is an interesting thing that a lot of people don't understand. If you have any kind of royal ancestry, the big obsession in about the 10th century was the Doomsday Book and recording all of the royal bloodlines. And most of those royal bloodlines go straight back to the Old Testament, where they hook into the genealogy in the Old Testament. And that was it was very important, to people to do that, because the closer you could be to Jesus, or, if you could find your family in the Bible, well, that must confirm that you have a right to rule, because here are your ancestors in the Bible, and that kind of validates you as an earthly ruler, so there are a lot of different reasons, but it's always interesting to kind of socially go back and deconstruct, okay, why did they do this? Because to us, it makes no sense today, but it controls so much that affects our life. Again, what else is influencing us from the Bronze Age today? Nothing that I know of, just Christianity.
Yeah.
Just this specific religion.
It's shifting, though. It is shifting.
It is, which is good. We can keep pushing more towards equality and thriving instead of surviving, and in a couple generations, our female descendants won't be able to say stuff like, my grandmother couldn't drive after dark or have a bank account or have a job or wasn't allowed to take care of herself because she was a female or couldn't vote, or, all the things that we've had to kind of push forward for. Really, Lilith was the ultimate feminist. She was the beginning of the feminist movement. Yes. Absolutely. Which is crazy.
So is there anything else you want to share about Lilith that you think?
I just appreciate you bringing her in. I like to share that. Thank you for including her story, because, she's a powerful woman, and I'd like to see her included in more. I feel like if little girls knew that they had these beautiful figures, these beautiful women of every color for every little girl, to feel empowered and to feel like you are special, and you are entitled to make decisions to take care of yourself that aren't being made for you by the men in your life. Because I feel like that's very relevant today. 2,000 years ago, it was relevant, and today it's relevant. And, we should just look at her as an example. It's okay, ladies.
What's interesting about Lilith is that I think it was in Priestess Path, I was doing the first live masterclass, and I do a guided meditation activation, and I never plan those. I just let them come in as they are. And what's interesting is if you look through any of my work, I don't really mention Lilith. It's like she stepped forward in that. And then that's when I had to be like, okay, because, you know, some of the women were saying like, she was my guide, because that's, you know, I think it came forward like Morgana or Morgan and Lilith, like, one will be your guide. Who is it? And I, you know, I just accept who it was. When we were done, a lot of the women were like, Lilith came with me and I don't know why, you know, tell me more about Lilith. And I was like, you know, Lilith confuses me. I'm going to have to talk to April and get back to you and give you some books to read, because I feel like she needs to be researched. But as
when Lilith shows up for me, it's always, you need to work on your self-care and your self-esteem and your value system. Really your value system. That's, I mean, you know, when she shows up in my life, I start immediately looking, all right, where am I not serving myself? Where, you know, where am I falling into my culture and my society? Where am I allowing the patriarchy or male influence to make decisions for me in my life? And every time I'll find it.
She's a beautiful example of a woman with integrity. When we look back actually at what we know, like she stood up for herself.
Right. And nobody else looked like her. She was literally the only one of her kind while she's making all these decisions, having no idea that we would come after her. You know what I mean? And again, like, I think that's a beautiful legacy. She's the first mother in that regard, you know, then Sophia would come after her in the chronological order. But if we look at it in the mythological order, Sophia would be Lilith's mother. Sophia would have been, you know what I mean? So there are several different ways we can approach this, which, while cool, is also frustrating, because the same people who gave us the information we have are responsible for why it's so cryptic and destroyed and altered and edited. So you know, it's always within reason what we can count on from these documents.
I think she wants to be known, just like in that meditation, like she comes flying out of my mouth and I'm like, okay, that's who's here, you know? And then I have to research her more. And, you know, that's why I reached out to you. But I think it's interesting. It wasn't just me bringing her in the meditation. It was the women who chose her. And then
I'm telling you,
tell me more. You know, she wants to be part of the Priestess Path. She
does.
And she isn't spoken of a lot. You know, it's Mary Magdalene, Mother Mary, Isis, but who's first?
Yeah, well, then, you know, we got to go way older. We got to go back to Sophia and Lilith.
Yeah.
You know, and that's who came first. You know, they were at the beginning. And Astarte, you know, you go back to Sumer and you start getting the Babylonian goddesses, you know, and that's the cool thing too, is like some of the old creation stories actually work the gods and goddesses in. You know, there are old Mesopotamian creation myths where Enki and Enlil, you know, the Sumerian gods, come down and they genetically engineer people. They put the first human inside their sister. You know, Astarte, she carries the body. The first human is all messed up and they can't figure out what's wrong. And they have to keep trying and keep trying and keep trying until they get the version they want. You know, so it's very interesting if you start to go back to our more ancient history and kind of read what they believed and how they were feeling. And then you start to see like, okay, so during the moment that society's starting to kind of question itself, and you have this introduction of monotheism and polytheism is suddenly being seen as undesirable. And at that moment, if women had stepped up, that was our moment. That was our moment 4,000 years ago, but we didn't know. You know what I mean? We didn't know. And so our moment is coming again. And this time, I think this is why Lilith is showing up. I think this is why she's coming out of your mouth. She's coming to your priestess class, because our time is coming again. And if we don't have the knowledge this time, guess what? We're going to do the same thing we did last time. And then how many millennia will we wait for this to shift around again, where we'll have a true opportunity for equality? Because the men are scared we want to be above them. That's never been the case. Just like Lilith, we've only ever wanted to be treated the same as our partner. You know, that's it.
Hopefully the world will come to that, where we're more masculine and feminine equal.
Well, that's our job too. We got to get that information out there.
Like even within, I mean, everything starts within. Like we're never going to see that in the world around us until we can own that within us. And that's where women, like we've been masculine run dominant for so long because that's what it took to survive, as you talked about. So
Yeah,
for us
absolutely.
to thrive, we have to
Yes,
be able to balance our masculine out with our feminine. Our feminine is what has been repressed, not just in women, but in men across the board.
absolutely. Our men are not taught to feel like they can have any kind of empathy, or they
Yeah.
can cry, or like I have a son, and I watched as culture and society kept telling my son that if he wanted to be an appropriate American man, he wasn't going to cry. He wasn't going to have, feelings like a girl. Here we are again, kicking like a girl, crying like a girl, thinking like a girl. I mean, it's everywhere. We're entrenched in it. And that's why we need to thrive. And that's why she's showing up to give us the information and allow us to live our lives in the way that she did.
Well, I think for anything to change in our world, a mass amount of us need to really understand our history
Mhm.
to be able to
Yes.
understand who we want to be in the future and where we have to understand where we come from, how we became who we are, because our
Right.
ancestry has a big part. It plays a huge role in who we are and
Absolutely.
how we're living today. And,
Yes.
I think Lilith is stepping through, and Magdalene too, like a bunch of us, their spirit is there as our guides. They are the ascended masters that are guiding us. They're there for whoever will hear them, heed their call. And we're rising to that. And I think it's important when you talk about feminism because that it's masculine and feminine in both men and women that need to
Yes.
be balanced. I don't want women to run the world. I don't want I don't want a
Yeah.
matriarchal society. For me, when I call myself a feminist, I want everyone to own their divine feminine, because when we're all balanced across the board, then we're not going to be fighting for, how many women presidents have we ever had? How many Black presidents have we ever had? Like, it should be equality across the board. And I think that starts within us until we can embrace and own even our roots. Like a lot of these people that are prejudiced, if they got their history done, their genealogy done, they probably have African
It'd be
American in
shocking.
their blood.
Absolutely.
They,
Absolutely.
it's a
And
lot of
most
the,
people don't even realize that this is where it came from. Like if you were to
yeah.
ask the average person, hey, did you know that women have been, repressed sociologically and culturally by organized religion for the past 2000 years? People would, what? No. But yes, this is the system, because people ask, well, how did they continue to do it? How they continue to keep women subservient? How did they keep them in this position as long as they did? They intrinsically wove our value into their, and notice I say their spirituality, and then they fed it to us, and then we were supposed to regurgitate it back to them on demand, and that's been the expectation. So
I think and we'll end it at this. I think we are who Lilith and Magdalene have been waiting for, on the other side of
absolutely.
wherever we go when we're done on earth. They are watching, looking down, saying, or looking up, saying, or whatever it is.
And what a
Like,
beautiful
hey,
point.
we've been waiting for you to grasp who we were, to take that baton and run with it and what we really meant. And I think that's what Lilith really wanted, was like, hey, I don't want to always have to be beneath you. Like you mentioned, like the
Subservient.
rocks and the dirt and like,
Yeah.
why should I always have to
Yeah,
be the one on my back? And women still live like
exactly.
that to this day. So I think it's
But think
important
about
to
how,
take that baton.
yes, and think about how beautiful that she stayed. She didn't have to. She didn't have to stay. And if you think about that, I mean, she could have left thousands of years ago. She could have taken all her energy with her. She could have, she didn't
Mhm.
have to stay here to influence us. She didn't have to stay here to see this job done. But here she is 5,000 years later, showing up and influencing all of us, in the direction that we need to be going right at the time we need to be doing it. So she loves us, I think, is the goal I'm trying to get at. Like if we ever had a female figure that showed up consistently over the years, and even though she's been demonized, she's been a constant. They tried to bury her and she always comes back like, look, daughters, I am here. I will always show up for you. And they can keep turning her into a succubus and every kind of other nasty thing they can think of. But we see her, we don't see her through the lenses that the men have told us to see her. And that's where we start to really get our thriving and our freedom, I think, is they can't control what we think anymore. And they can't control what we learn. And they can't influence what we see. So, now we just follow her example. And, if there are rocks and dirt on the floor, hell no, I'm not going to lay on that. You lay on that.
How about make us a bed of roses and we'll both
there you
take
go.
turns.
Or we can make it together. I'm all about it. We'll make it together.
Make it together.
It'll be
there
fabulous.
Yes.
Thank you, Harmony, so much for including me in this. I'm so happy you're bringing Lilith's story out. This is going to be amazing.
I just love the information you share. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Of course.
I just feel like it's important. We know we are daughters of Lilith. We are daughters of Magdalene. It's important to embrace them
Sophia.
both. We are daughters of Sophia. We are,
everything, all of that.
Yep. So
yes.
Thank you. I'm going to go ahead
and
end our call. I appreciate you doing this. I hope we'll be able to have you again because
many times.
Love what you share.
many times. Thank you, honey.
Thank you.
Happy Sunday.
Let's see. So how do I stop my recording?